It is the very first attraction in this arena this morning. It's Mr. Ian Summerhill. He probably announced himself with a bang, I expect. Mr. Ian Summerhill on the history of the sporting gun. Thank you, Ian.
Good morning and welcome to Frampton Country Fair. As James said, be warned, there is going to be a few bangs. As James said, be warned, there is going to be a few bangs. Unfortunately, I can't show you how guns work without you. Unfortunately, I can't show you how guns work without using a little bit of black powder. We're using black powder that was found by the Chinese about 2,000 years ago. But the Chinese, to start with, only used it for fireworks, for big displays. They did try and use it to shoot arrows out of bamboo, but I don't think it was very successful. It wasn't until Marco Polo went over to China and brought the black powder back, because it wasn't called gunpowder then, because they didn't have guns. They brought this black powder back that would make all these lovely patterns and all these big bangs. Marco Polo brought it back, but nothing really happened until round about 1350. And there was a friar, a monk in Germany, and he put the ingredients of black powder together and worked out the best way to get the best burn. And it was sulphur, saltpeter, and charcoal. Now the saltpeter is in there because when it burns, it produces oxygen. And if you've got a fire in a tube, it needs oxygen to burn. And that's what the saltpeter does. Later on in the Middle Ages, we had something called saltpeter men. And their job was to go out, and people, they didn't have toilets in the old days. They used to sort of go in the hallway in the buildings. That would put urine into the ground. That would then crystallise and produce saltpeter. And the saltpeter men had a law, an act of parliament passed, because the country needed saltpeter to make black powder. They could go into any house, dig up the floor, and take the saltpeter out. The problem was that people would be in the fields, at work, travelling, get back home, open the front door, and find they got a great big hole there. So in the end, they had to restrict the saltpeter men to make good any holes they made. To start with, they had hand cannons. The first time that cannons were used was at the Battle of Agincourt, which was 1415, something like that. The French used it against the English, but our archers, we were still into archery and horse riding and cavalry at that stage, and our archers won the day. But the problem is, it was clumsy, it was time consuming, and you normally only had one shot. What they needed was a mechanism to fire the primary powder off, which was in the pan. And what they had was what's called a matchlock. Now the matchlock dates back to around about 1450. Dates are vague because in Europe, in Italy, in France, in Spain, in England, we were all trying to develop ways of producing firearms. The matchlock, which this is an English Civil War Society one, so this would be 1640. So basically for 200 years we were using matchlocks. there was no real expansion or development of the gun. The problem is that the matchlock is very time consuming. The first thing you have to have is a match, and it's a piece of cord, and the cord is impregnated with saltpeter. Now somewhere here I've got a lighter, there we are. The first thing you've got to do is light your match. Now you've heard the expression, keep it under your hat. It's believed that that came from musketeers, because people that used a musket was called a musketeer. And to keep it dry, they kept it under their hat. And that's where the expression comes from. We've got to get this to burn a little bit. There we are. It's glowing. They would have had a stick, and they would have put this over a stick, but I'm going to give that to my apprentice, Dan. He's doing a wonderful job. Round of applause for Dan. Thank you very much. Now then, up until we had a cartridge, everything was loaded from the muzzle. There was a few attempts at breech loading, but it was expensive to use, and they were normally on fancy guns. So we have 2 grams of black powder, and for what, we're using recycled toilet paper. Colour off, doesn't matter. And one in there. And then the ramrod pushes it down. You've got to make sure you push it down so you haven't got a gap there. Now comes the good part. Just imagine trying to do this. One, if you're trying to shoot pigeon-banded in a tree, because we don't think they would have used this for shooting flying animals, or rabbits sitting on the ground. This all had to have gone through and been done. Now what they do, is you put the match in, and you dress it to make sure it's down on the powder. You open it up, and you pray, because you don't know if it's going to work. You blow on it because you want it quite hot to burn the powder. Because you don't know if it's going to work. You blow on it because you want it quite hot to burn the powder. That can do several things. It can put the match out. If it's damp and wet, you might only get one shot. You've now got to go through the same process again. Take the match off. Reload it. I'm going to ask Deb if you can put it out. Thank you. Yes, please. Now, we have to find some way of making it easier to fire the gun off. We're still using black powder. We've still got the powder, a wad, a ball if you're shooting deer or if you're in the army, and shot if you're shooting small animals or birds. So what they came up with is the flintlock. And the flintlock dates back to around about 1550, 1560. There was something called the Snapple, which was in Holland, and that was designed by the Dutch, and they were basically, you'd call them domestic terrorists. They were highwaymen that would rob you, but they couldn't rob you at night if they were using a matchlock, because the match would burn and you could see them. So they had to have some way of firing a firearm where you couldn't be seen. So they developed the Snapple, a flintlock method, but slightly different. What they did they put a flint in a cock that hit a piece of iron called the frizzen. That would create the sparks, and the sparks would flash the powder off in the pan. So we've still got a tube, we've still got a pan, but this time we've got the striking device, the flint. Now the flint would have been used to strike and make sparks and make fires for thousands of years. The cavemen used to do it. So once again, it has to be loaded. And once again, this all takes time. Now, this is my friend Gerald's big gun, his single fowling piece, and these would have been used for shooting duck, geese, but we don't think they would have been used for shooting birds flying. We think they mainly would have been stalking them and shooting them on the ground. Because what they were doing, they were shooting for the pot. Wildfowling in the early days, in the 1600s, wasn't really a job. It wasn't until later, when we had the railways, and they could bring the ducks to market to the big towns the same day they shot them. They could shoot them in the morning, put them on the train, and then send them into London, into Bristol, into Liverpool, Manchester, or wherever. Now, normally, they would then, once you put the wad on, you take a powder flask and you put this would take about 2 ounces a shot in a 4-bore, and you would load it, and then you'd have a card over shot pot, a very thin piece of card, just to stop the shot falling out. But what you've got to do, you've got to do the priming powder. Now, what we did was, we got a little flask, and that's got fine powder in, and that goes in the priming. Now, if it doesn't go off, and it doesn't work, and it just flashes, but doesn't flash the charge off, we've got a flash in the pan. A lot of sayings that are involved with firearms ended being used in everyday use for all sorts of things. Going off half cock comes from gun making. But we still only got one barrel. Now we're getting somewhere. The detonation is quicker. I don't have to fiddle with the match, but the flintlock had one problem. It still didn't like the wet. Now there was a pastor who, local parish church up in Scotland, he was a great wildfowler. Alexander Forsyth. Now Alexander Forsyth loved his wildfowling, and he used to have a flintlock, and he was fed up of going out in the wet. So what he decided was he developed something called the scent bottle, and that was the start of the percussion system. You know, you hit a red match and it goes bang. You use a hammer and an anvil. Not supposed to do that. If any kids are listening, health and safety wouldn't allow you to do it today. But when I was a kid, you had an anvil, you put a red match on it, hit it with a hammer, and it'd go bang. That's by percussion. So they used formulate of mercury. They put it in a scent bottle. It had a little reservoir of formulate one side, on the other. They would turn it up one way. That would put the formulate into the pan. They would turn it back the other way, and the striker would then hit it. It only lasted a few years. And he was an Englishman. They say he was an American. Joshua Shaw. Now Joshua Shaw, you won't see it very often, but he discovered what we call the percussion cap. He put the formulates of mercury in a little copper cup that you could put on the nipple. That got rid of the flintlock. Now Joshua Shaw was an Englishman. Although he was in Philadelphia, in America, he was a painter. And if you've seen the old paintings, around about 1800, 1820, they used to do landscape paintings with farm animals on, either sheep or prize bulls or Highland cattle. That's the type of paintings they used to do. He was from Yorkshire. He went to Bath, which is just down the road there. He painted in Bath, and then he went to America and went to Pennsylvania and was big landscape artist. And his paintings go for millions of dollars. But he designed the percussion cap. The problem is, he designed it in around about 1814. But nothing happened because there was a court case. Because two people designed it. And the patent wasn't granted to 1884. Sorry about the dates, but it's just things that I've had in my brain that I've worked up for years. Then we come to the percussion system. Still single shot. They had started making double flints by this time. The first person to put barrels side by side with ribs on was a guy called Manton. Now Manton was a famous London gunmaker. And Manton even developed his own percussion system called the tube lock. And instead of having a copper cap with the formula in, he had it in a tube. And the pan was hollowed out, so the tube would go in, and then the cover would go on. There was a hole in the centre of it, and the hammer had like a hammer wedge on it that would go down and strike the copper tube that would fire it off. Now the percussion system, you still have to load the gun from the muzzle. Shall we use a double, just to show you? Now, what you do when you're going to use a percussion gun is the first thing you do is what's called cap off. Where you've cleaned it and oiled it, what happens is the oil can get stuck in the holes between the nipple and the barrel. So you just flash it off just to clean it out. And then 2 grams of powder in each side. Now I actually use this one for pigeon shooting. Couple of bits of toilet paper. We can't use wads really in a ring. It doesn't look very good. And we don't really want things flying around in the air. So what we're doing basically is creating confetti. Now we've got the 2 barrels together, we've now got 2 shots. So if you've wounded bird or missed a bird with the first shot, you've got the possibility of the second shot. Shall I let my apprentice have a go at this one? Yes, he's been standing there nice and patiently. I thought he was going to ask me a question if I'd forgotten anything. Now then, put it onto half cock, and the other one. Okay, then you go on to full cock, and then put it up in the air. Now we've got 2 shots. shots. By now, it's now the early 1800s. We've now got gamekeepers. People are now standing on pegs. They're shooting flying pheasants and flying partridge. They're beaters. The estates are doing well. But this didn't last very long. The matchlock was 200 years. The percussion developed around about 1840. By 1850, it was almost redundant. A few people still had them. But what they developed was the pin fire. And it had a cartridge with a little pin that came out of it. That's just one I just made up just as a demonstration. Unfortunately, you can't get cartridges for these anymore. But this was a true breech loader.
You're going to help me then, an apprentice, have you?
Yes. A dummy thrower,
The cartridge
a decoy placer,
would go in the gun.
You name it, Chris will do it.
Would close up.
All good stuff.
And once again, you had a half cock on here.
Yeah, same old
You had the half cock so you could open the gun. Because if the hammer was fired, it would hold on to the pin and you couldn't open the gun.
Yeah, it's enjoy, isn't it?
So you needed the half cock on it and then the full cock to give it its full throw to make it work. This came over in 1851. But this only lasted 10 years. Some people may have had pin fires for a few years later, but by 1860, doors had developed centre fire. Now the centre fire cartridge is what we use today. Anybody uses the door's paint. It's the primer that's in the back of your cartridge. And this made life a lot easier. It then started to develop the gun trade. We had the Empire. We were selling to all over the world. Birmingham gun trade was taking off. The gun makers were trying to outdo each other. They were painting different types of action. And one person would work out one way of locking the barrels to the action. It was painted so nobody else could use it, or they could only use it under license. So they would develop another way. And if you look at Crudgington's book, the modern British shotgun, it's called, I've got to get this right, the British shotgun, they have got almost every development of the breech loading system. Although today we've got the side-by-side and over and under that's got top levers. They have levers that were on the side, levers that were by the guard, and this was all to get over the paintings.
Because although we like this sort of stuff, it ain't the same as the real thing.
Then, with the modern cartridge, we've still got the hammers on the outside of the gun. But now, we've got two cartridges. Like to shoot, only let him have a cartridge and let him walk around the field. You just set that something to the tape, brilliant. Then they can see over there, you see. Now you've got two cartridges in, you don't have to worry about priming it, you don't have to worry about the flintlock not working. All you do is pop the cartridges in, close the gun,
then I can get what I like.
pull the hammers back, bird goes over, you missed that one. You need more practice, my friend. Now we've got the hammer gun. What they had to do then was find a way, and this is what we were saying, was that the The gun makers were trying to outdo each other on pace. They then wanted the lock actually on the inside, which we call hammerless.
I want you to go into the...
We've got the Purdy's, the Hollands, the Churchills, which are all side locks.
Dump it in the middle.
There's a lot of work goes into making a side lock. That's why they're so expensive. What a new Purdy today, you're talking round about 40,000
I'm going to put the geese.
to start, and then we'll go up from there. If you want it gold inlaid or you want diamonds in it,
Where this table
you can spend as much as you like.
build a hide.
But the basic shotgun, the side-by-side box lock, which was developed by Anson and Dealey
Hide just to the left.
in Birmingham, they both worked for Wesley Richards.
I build a kit there.
And they developed the cheap, well I say cheap, affordable shotgun that every man could use. And once again, it came
As soon as it's over,
with 2 cartridges. Got to make sure it works.
So what I'm going to do is put 2 duck dummies. I'm going to put 1 duck dummy out in the rabbit. Find it.
Everybody's had an AYA Yeoman, that's all it is. I use it for pigeon shooting. It fits me, I get on with it, I can shoot with it. See, I said we were going to create confetti. It's lovely, isn't it? Should have done it all different, shouldn't I? And then it would have looked nice as it came down. We could have had pink or red or green or blue. Now, that made life easy. But let's go back to the old days, just to show you how long it took. Now, the first thing we've got to do is get the match going again.
Yeah.
There was a story they tell in
I'll
Bath.
have one of the dummies down here.
There was 2 armies up on Lansdowne, the Battle of Lansdowne in the Civil War.
We get somebody in to buy that
Obviously, Roundheads and Cavaliers,
later.
the Royalists and the Parliamentarians.
That's what I'm doing. So if I get somebody to come in and fire one shot,
Now, I can't remember which way round it was, but there was a wall, and it was getting dark, and they stopped fighting.
then
And they put the matches on the wall, and the breeze was allowing the match to keep going.
I don't know what I'm going to do here.
They kept the matches going, and whichever army it was didn't want to fight the next day, so they wandered off in the night, and they weren't there to fight the next day. And that was the tale of the Battle of Lansdowne. They are. Funny how you remember these things. And there was one centre fire system, and it was designed by Needham. And what he did is he made a cartridge up, but instead of putting the primer at the end, he put the primer, this must have been 1855, 1860, he put the primer inside the cartridge, and it used a pin that went right the way in, and it's called Needham's pin fire. I've only ever seen 2 in my life, and I'm told if you can find a pin fire cartridge, they're worth about £10,000. So, I haven't found one yet, but I'm still looking. And I'm hoping that one day, when I open up loads of rubbish that people give me with gun bits in, that I'm going to find one. It's like the Holy Grail. Now, what we've got the priming done. You see how long this takes? And I'm still working while I'm talking to you. Just imagine either trying to shoot animals doing this, or trying to have a walk. This is what's called dressing it. before, oh no, they didn't use matchlocks for shooting flying birds. I've really got to take my words back. I don't think we did here, but there's reports in Spanish, in an old Spanish book that was translated, that in 1540, in southern Spain, they used matchlocks for shooting flying partridge. They used spaniels, we've got spaniels today, they come from southern Spain. They would mark where the partridge were lying up. The dog would then flush it and it would be flying straight away. So they weren't doing swinging shots, but they would put the bird up and then they would shoot it with a matchlock. If it's going straight away, you can do it. I've shot clays with this. Not very good, sirs, or overhead, but with clays going straight away, you can even shoot clays with it. Anyway, I think I've got my time. Thank you very much for helping me, Dan.
Pleasure's all mine, eh?
My apprentice has disappeared back into his shed. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you have an interesting show. There's lots of things to see, lots of things in this ring. Thank you very much.
Ian, thank you very much. Absolutely wonderful display.